As shocking as it might sound, the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett himself, doesn't like diversification and claims that it makes no sense if you know what you're doing. Today, I'll take a look into this common investing narrative, and I'll also explain why it doesn't make sense for some investors, so stay tuned. Hi everybody, welcome back to The Contrarian. My name's Logan. I really like to talk about overall success in investing, as well as going against crowd thinking mentality. So if you like these kinds of topics, just consider subscribing. I also want to make this clear that none of this is financial advice, and I'm not a certified financial advisor, so I can't give advice. So basically just don't take any of this as advice. First of all, it's important to note just how common of a narrative diversifying your portfolio is. Nearly every book on investing and every investment advisor out there will recommend it. And there are definitely advantages that come with diversifying, as well as some disadvantages. First, let's look at the potential advantages. Advantages of diversification include lowering your overall risk in that you will lose less should a particular company or industry be hit hard. The very idea of diversification is essentially spreading out your portfolio over, as much of the market as possible. And because of this, you lose less should, say, oil be hit hard like it was earlier this year, or if a company in the index fund you hold goes downhill. It simply just spreads out your portfolio to track the market as a whole, and because of this, you won't lose very much should any particular company go downhill, or even if one of them goes bankrupt, it won't hurt you very much. And because of this, diversification is very popular among pension funds, 401ks, retirement funds, pretty much any sort of fund that by nature needs to be the lowest risk possible, but that still needs to return growth equal to the market. There is one proponent of diversification who goes against Warren Buffett, and that is Ray Dalio. And I like to keep an eye out for what Ray Dalio is saying, but this is one area that I also don't really agree with him, and that Warren Buffett definitely doesn't agree with him either. Ray Dalio claims that it lowers your risk while keeping your potential rate of return the same. Now, Dalio is correct in certain ways here. It does decrease your risk, but unlike Dalio, Buffett and others like myself would not agree on the part of keeping your return the same. It's just very hard, if not impossible, to keep your return the same with diversification. Now, let's get into the drawbacks now. There are some drawbacks to diversification, as I'll go into. Let's first look at a clip of Buffett talking about essentially the foolishness of diversification for investors who know what they're doing.
So there's nothing magic. We like to put a lot of money in things that we feel strongly about. And that gets back to the diversification question. We think diversification is, as practiced generally, makes very little sense for anyone that knows what they're doing. Diversification is a protection against ignorance. I mean, if you want to make sure that nothing bad happens to you relative to the market, you own everything. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that is a perfectly sound approach for somebody who does not feel they know how to analyze businesses. If you know how to analyze businesses and value businesses, it's crazy to own 50 stocks or 40 stocks or 30 stocks probably, because there aren't that many wonderful businesses that are understandable to a single human being in all likelihood, and to have some super wonderful business and then put money in number 30 or 35 on your list of attractiveness and forego putting more money into number 1 just strikes Charlie and me as madness. And it's conventional practice, and it may, if all you have to achieve is average, it may preserve your job, but it's a confession in our view that you don't really understand the businesses that you own. On a personal portfolio basis, I own one stock, but it's a business I know, and it leaves me very comfortable. So, do I need to own 28 stocks in order to, have proper diversification? It'd be nonsense.
So essentially what Buffett is getting at is that diversification makes it very hard to outperform the market. If, for example, you have an actively managed fund that has a limit of at least 40 positions, so you can't have fewer than 40 positions. And let's assume that by agreement, this fund cannot let a position exceed 5% of the total portfolio. And this is quite common among actively managed pension funds and just actively managed funds in general. They won't let certain positions grow too much. So in this scenario, you can't allow your winners to run past 2 times the initial price you buy them at. Let's say that one of your 40 companies reports great earnings and the stock doubles in price. So now you begin to have to trim it as it is exceeding 5%, and it has doubled since you bought it. But what if it still had a ways to run? What if this was just an exceptional company and the next 2 quarters and maybe 2 years are great and it continues to rise? You'll still have to trim it as it is rising. And this, idea of, trimming positions to keep them within a certain size, this goes against a fundamental rule of investing, and that is of letting your winners run as long as they can. You want to let your winners run as long as possible. And in doing this, you really limit how much your winners can pull you along. In needing to constantly trim your positions as they rise, many diversified funds limit the potential returns they can offer. Now there's another potential problem here as well, in that is the bigger your portfolio gets in number, your risk will go down, but also the potential to outperform the market goes down as well. Your returns have a greater likelihood of simply following the market's returns the more positions you have. So eventually there's virtually no difference between an actively managed fund with dozens of positions and an index fund like the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones. Buffett then explains that there aren't that many great businesses, and that he and his partner Charlie Munger would much rather concentrate more on their portfolio into having it in a few exceptionally good businesses than having several exceptionally good businesses with a larger number of decent ones. Now this method has worked well for Buffett and his investment company Berkshire Hathaway. He's outperformed the S&P 500 roughly 2 times since the inception of Berkshire Hathaway, and this is a really incredible rate of return over decades of time. Recently, his rate of return hasn't been so great, but it's important to keep the long-term view in mind and just how significant this is. And if we look at Buffett's portfolio allocation in the past, it definitely would not be called a diversified portfolio at different times. At different times, he's concentrated his portfolio heavily into different businesses such as Coca-Cola. Apple is one he's heavily concentrated in now, as well as Bank of America. So he's really, if you take a look at his portfolio over time, it would definitely not be classified as a diversified portfolio. That's not his investing style. Again, none of this is financial advice. I just want you guys to take this into account, that if you learn what you're doing in investing, I'll leave a link in the description to a past video I made of how to really find good companies to invest in. But essentially a lot of it just has to do with management, the management team behind a company. I've seen a decent company with fantastic management, and that company has done fantastically well. I've also seen companies with a decent fundamentals but bad management, and they've just run them into the ground in the past few years. So a lot of it depends on management, but also these fundamentals that I talk about in this video. So if you guys want to learn more about this, I'll leave the video in the description. But anyway, let me know what you guys think about this. I know it goes against a very common investing narrative of you having to be diversified, and anyway, I want to know what you guys think about this, and I hope to see you again.